Wrestling is one of the oldest forms of entertainment in the world, and it offers plenty of reasons to watch, from dazzling athleticism to hilarious comedy to the charismatic heroes you can get behind. Yet one thing stands above them all when it comes to drawing in viewers, the very fuel that allows storylines to flourish. At this point you probably know what I'm talking about, and while it may go over the head of the average viewer, it really shouldn't come as any surprise. After all, people have proven time and time again that nothing drives them to watch an event more than hatred. From the Chiefs Super Bowl runs to shows like Velma to controversial figures like Jake Paul, if there's anything people crave more than to see someone win, it's to see someone lose. And in wrestling, that job falls on one very specific type of person, the villains of the wrestling world, or as they're known in the business, the heel. Hi, I'm Nick, and before I can establish the importance and effects of a great heel, I need to give you an example. And who better an example than the first to ever do it? This is George Wagner, or as you likely know him, Gorgeous George. Born March 24th of 1915 in Butte, Nebraska, George came into a very different era of wrestling. There was no major dominant promotions like the WWE of today. Instead, everything was split into territories, with various small promotions spread across them. Not only that, but the matches themselves were very different, focusing on slow, gritty, technical wrestling, and above all, realism. Nonetheless, George got into the business early, dropping out of school at the age of 14 to pick up any odd job he could to support his family. This quickly led him to wrestling, competing at local carnivals, get paid 35 cents for every win, and he took off. By the age of 17, getting booked by the region's top promoter, Morris Siegel, and he kept up the pace, by 1938 winning his first title and picking up another in 1939. But right around this time, something even bigger happened. George got married. But the impact of this was beyond just holy matrimony. You see, George decided to do the wedding ceremony in ring in front of a live audience, and they went crazy. So much so, George decided to reenact this event at multiple shows, drawing in huge amounts of viewers. This triggered a revelation for George. While the technical style of the era certainly had its place, if they wanted to expand their audience, they needed a little more entertainment. That's when he caught wind of another wrestler, one who went by Lord Patrick Lansdowne, who walked out to the ring in a velvet robe accompanied by two valets. George fell in love with the gaudish bravado of the character, but figured he could do it a little bit better. And that is when the Glamour Boy was born. Making his debut in 1941, he was quick to antagonize with his exaggerated behavior, walking out to the ring with a group of girls who spread flower petals in his path and sprayed perfume all around the ring. Audiences had never seen this level of showmanship, and soon began to pour in like never before, no longer to root for George Wagner's victory, but to see the arrogant and flamboyant Gorgeous George come crashing down. George became a sensation, bringing in a newfound age of success for professional wrestling, and while bad guy characters may have existed up to this point, he launched them into the stratosphere by giving birth to the gimmick. Now that I've given a bit of an example of a great heel, let's dive into why heels are so impactful. Well, to put it simply, anger is a strong emotion. When a fan base sees their hero win, the reaction can be massive, partying and rejoicing for all the world to see. But when they lose, there are tears, there are riots, there is chaos, and it makes it all the sweeter when the hero finally does prevail, because without that struggle, it feels empty. So let's take a look at an example of the effect great heel work can have on the audience by going back to one of the most controversial events in WWE history, and one of the company's most controversial heels. On November 9th, 1997, a match was held between up-and-comer Shawn Michaels and the hero of our story, Bret the Hitman Hart. In an era fresh off the heels of Hulk Hogan's departure from the Federation, the status of top guy fell on the shoulders of Bret Hart. He wasn't flashy or high-flying, and he may not have had Hogan's look or charismatic, exaggerated gimmick, but what he did possess was incredible technical talent. Hart consistently put on incredible matches no matter who he was lined up against, This guy was so good, he could turn even the greenest of wrestlers into gold. And the fans loved him, especially those from his home country of Canada. But there were those that didn't love him, that being management. Due to these disagreements, Hart decided to sign with WWE's biggest competitor, WCW. This particularly bothered the head of the company, Vince McMahon, who felt betrayed by Hart leaving after over 13 years with the company. But initially, he kept things professional. After all, Bret had McMahon's most sought-after title, so they began discussing plans on how Hart would drop the belt. Vince pitched his nearest pay-per-view match, a match against Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series. The problem was, Hart didn't like Michaels. They had a feud backstage and he didn't want to put him over. On top of that, the match was going to take place in Montreal, Canada, and Hart didn't want to lose the title in front of his home crowd. Vince agreed, deciding that the match would end in disqualification, allowing Hart to retain his title and drop it in a later match or simply vacate it. But it didn't end there. No, not with Mr. McMahon. Instead, he came up with a scheme, a way to get back at the perceived slight from Hart. Now let's get back to where we started this story. November 9th, 1997, Montreal, Canada. The plan was clear. The ref would be knocked out and HBK would put the Hitman into his very own iconic finisher, something few wrestlers would have agreed to. Before the ref would wake up, Hart would reverse Michaels' sharpshooter into his very own. Michaels would submit, but the ref would still be unconscious. Hart would let go of the hold in an attempt to wake the official and get hit with the Sweet Chin Music, HBK's finish. Then a second ref would rush in and attempt to count, but be quickly broken up by Owen Hart, Bret's brother, sparking a massive brawl that would lead to a disqualification. But that's not what happened. Instead, when Michaels applied the sharpshooter, the ref, under instruction of Vince McMahon, called the match, despite Hart not submitting. This was the Montreal Screwjob. Hart had been lied to, had his championship stolen, been submitted by his own finishing move, and all in front of his home crowd. Not only did this have a major effect on Hart himself as he stormed the locker room and decked McMahon, but the crowd. Well, the crowd lost it. You see, during the rivalry build-up to this match, Michaels had been doing various anti-Canada stunts, disrespecting their flag amongst other things. So, safe to say, the large Canadian audience they were performing in front of did not like him. They were outraged, furious, all 20,000 practically bursting at the seams, well aware of what had taken place. But above all, they were engaged. While this whole event had seen some negative impact, it did serve to set up Shawn Michaels to an incredible degree. He proceeded to draw in massive viewership in the aftermath of the Screwjob, no longer rooting for an up-and-coming rebel face, but instead coming in droves in hopes to see the slick heel get what he deserved. Obviously, Shawn Michaels would go down as an all-time wrestler as both a face and heel with a legendary career, still affecting the business to this day in his general manager role. Okay, I can hear what you're saying. Sure, heels may play a role in the business, but at the end of the day, the true stars, the wrestlers that people rally behind, those are the heart of wrestling. You don't see heels topping the merch sales or inspiring a generation, and that's a fair argument. But I'd like to provide a simple counter, that those people may not have been as beloved as they were if they hadn't faced great heels. So allow me to take you through one more example, with one of the biggest faces in recent wrestling, a man with one simple goal: the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. Cody was destined for wrestling from day one. After all, his father was the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, an incredibly successful wrestler for his era and a successful booker. Yet this wasn't the only shadow Cody would have to climb out of, as he also had an older brother, Dustin Rhodes Jr., who may not have had the most illustrious career but did solidify himself as one of the most iconic WWE characters of all time, as Goldust. And he's continued having success in other promotions to this day, so expectations were high. And when Rhodes joined WWE's main roster in 2007, he was okay. He was certainly green, showing decent mic skills and in-ring abilities, but he wasn't really anything special. He didn't stand out. And that's what brought him the first and biggest hurdle in his career: gimmick changes. He started out simple as a babyface rookie, which wasn't bad necessarily, but was certainly generic. Soon he had a heel turn and found himself aligned with the Randy Orton-led Legacy stable. This certainly found more success for Cody, especially being paired with a commodity like the Viper. But at the end of the day, he was still just a generic cocky heel. Soon though, he would find a new stride in his post-Legacy era as dashing Cody Rhodes. Once again, this wasn't the most unique character we'd seen, just an arrogant heel obsessed with vanity. But nonetheless, Cody killed the role and started gaining traction, especially when he suffered a broken nose, which drove him to return under a new gimmick when he recovered, undashing Cody Rhodes. This certainly marked the peak of Cody Rhodes' first WWE run in terms of popularity, as this Dr. Doom-esque character was going over well with the crowd. Yet he still struggled to escape the mid-card, and Vince McMahon thought he was capable of more. So after a few more generic tag team runs, Rhodes was subjected to a gimmick change that's effectively ended his first stint in the WWE, and for most wrestlers, probably would have ended their career. It was decided he would take after his brother and take on a weird-centric gimmick. While this did serve to showcase Cody's character work skills, it didn't land whatsoever. And in his frustrations with the front office, Cody officially departed from the WWE in 2016. For most, it would have ended there. He was now the failure of the Rhodes family, only to be remembered for doing Randy Orton's dirty work and for one of the worst gimmicks of all time. But that didn't sit right with Cody Rhodes. No, this couldn't be the end. Instead of settling or giving up, Cody grinded on the indies, reinventing himself in all aspects, from improving his in-ring performance and mic skills to the most important of all, finding his gimmick. All of this effort, this work, the years of being overlooked and underutilized culminated on April 2nd, 2022, when Rhodes did the unthinkable. He made a return to the biggest stage, not as dashing or undashing, not as Stardust, but a new man with one mission. Cody Rhodes was back to earn the success he felt he always deserved, to live up to his family name, to finish the story. This was the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. The people loved it. Cody had gathered a large audience across the indies and they were ready to see this run. Everyone wanted to see this story finished, yet there stood one problem, one obstacle in his way, a man by the name of Roman Reigns. Reigns' career path was similar to Rhodes in the sense that he came from a legendary family of professional wrestlers, but it differed greatly when it came to the success Reigns found when he was promoted from developmental. You see, he made his main roster debut with the Shield stable, one of the most iconic teams in wrestling. This got him off to a hot start, with the entire squad getting over during their dominant run. But all good things must come to an end. Eventually the Shield split and the WWE was quick to begin working on solo pushes for the now former members, and no one got a bigger push out of the trio than Roman Reigns. The problem was, Roman had very little mic experience. He got over with the Shield as the silent muscle of the group, so now in his babyface role he was struggling to get over. But those who are seasoned WWE fans know that Vince McMahon loved nothing more than a big guy, and he was set that Roman Reigns was the next star up, so they pushed him. And pushed him. And when audiences weren't buying into it, they pushed him even harder. This became especially clear after the 2015 Royal Rumble, which Reigns won. In response, the crowd went, well, they hated it. The stadium was overtaken with a cacophony of boos. They even rolled The Rock, probably the most widely famous person on their roster at the time, out to the ring to try and get Reigns over. But nothing worked. Of course, Vince was stubborn. Reigns' face run continued for many years after this, but come 2020, enough was enough. The front office realized they needed to do something different, and so came the best decision for Roman's career since the Shield. But first, let me explain something for those unfamiliar with wrestling. The term heat is used to describe a crowd's disliking of a heel, effectively how bad they want them to fail. But there are two different kinds of heat: kayfabe heat, which is wrath drawn by scripted heel actions, and real heat, which is when the crowds genuinely dislike a wrestler in real life, whether that be because of how the wrestler is as an actual person, or just because they don't like what's being done with the character. So at this point in his career, Reigns had a lot of real heat. People saw him as a mediocre talent or more than tired of his extreme and long-winded push by the promotion, so the front office decided to lean into it, and have Roman turn heel. And to make up for Reigns' generic personality, they gave him one of the best gimmicks in recent history. Let's step back a moment. Earlier I said that Reigns came from a legendary wrestling family, but to be honest, that was an understatement. The The Anoa'i family is by far the most historied family in professional wrestling. If you've seen a Samoan in the WWE, odds are they were related to this family in some way or another. There are 6 Hall of Famers to come out of this family tree. So the writers took advantage of this and donned Reigns the Tribal Chief, teaming him up with fellow Samoans and real-life relatives Jimmy and Jey Uso, amongst others. This blew Roman up. He suddenly went from one of the most genuinely hated men in the business to the most over heel in the world. Now, we return to Cody Rhodes. After suffering a severe chest injury, Cody was put out of work for 8 months. But come the 2023 Royal Rumble, the biggest event in wrestling, he made an unexpected triumphant return. Not only that, he won the whole thing. This gave him a title shot at the biggest stage of the WWE, WrestleMania. There, he faced Roman Reigns for the undisputed Universal Championship, and everyone was behind Rhodes. The match was close, but it seemed like our hero was gonna pull it off. But the thing that made Roman Reigns such a threat was not just his in-ring ability, it was his influence. One of Reigns' followers, Solo Sikoa, interfered, allowing Roman to pull off the victory. It was over. After all these years, all this work, all of this blood, sweat, and tears, it wasn't enough. Cody couldn't finish the story. Just like his father, just like his brother, he couldn't put that belt around his waist. The next year went by, and while Rhodes had notable accomplishments here and there, they all felt empty in the wake of failing to accomplish his real goal. But January 27th of 2024 came, and with it, the Royal Rumble. 30 men would enter, 1 would leave. And despite all the struggle, Cody held on to the one thing, the very thing that had gotten him through the hardest of times to where he is today, his iron will. And
for the first time in over a quarter of a century, a man has gone back to back to win the Royal Rumble match.
He did it. He won it again, joining a list of only 3 other men to win 2 consecutive Royal Rumbles. It was a familiar scene, as he once again was heading to WrestleMania to face Roman Reigns. But this time, things were different. Cody had allies of his own, and a newfound drive that exceeded his already incredible work ethic. On April 7th, 2024, Cody Rhodes fought tooth and nail, and he walked away victorious. For the first time, a member of the Rhodes family hoisted the Ultimate Belt. This has gone down as one of the best storylines in recent pro wrestling history, and drew in viewership to match. And this leads me to my conclusion. While yes, people come for the heroes, they want to get behind people like Cody Rhodes. Without the heel, without Roman Reigns standing as an obstacle in his path, without that struggle, it feels empty. So to quote the title of a film starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, no pain, no gain. Without the incredible talent of wrestling heels to create that struggle, to build that conflict, to draw that negative emotion from the crowd, and in the end, bring the impact of our hero's victory, well, there wouldn't really be professional wrestling as we know it today. And that, my friends, is the art of the heel. Bye.